right. Well, welcome to Power BI Dev Camp once again. This is a fascinating topic to me because I built some reports about a year and a half ago, maybe closer to 2 years ago now, that needed to be available in multiple languages. It was in support of some of the COVID efforts, and so I was creating the reports, and I tried to create them based on the tools that I had or the experience that I had, and it was an uphill climb every time. Um, just all the pieces that needed to go in order to support creating a single report or multiple. Ultimately, I wound up with creating multiple versions of the front end, each one of them being translated into a new language
Heard that one
dealing with
before.
language codes
Yeah.
and all those pieces, and also trying to use the user culture codes to show off the language show it up in the correct language. Oh wow, it was a uphill climb the whole time. So when I heard that you were building, Ted, when I heard that you were building this, I was really excited to be able to join you and learn from you as to what you're doing. So, by way of introduction, my name is Scott Sewell. I'm on the Power BI Cat team. And I'm really here as a student of Ted Pattison. Ted, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. Happy New Year. We haven't seen you in Power BI Dev Camp since the beginning of the year. But what we have this session, as Scott said, is, we're pretty excited to talk about the new guidance that we have and, many things that I think you'll see it's much easier to build multi-language reports, than it's been in the past. So let's go ahead and crank things up here. So we have a pretty good agenda here. I'm going to be moving through at a pretty good clip, but there's different types of translations. There's 3 different types, and we'll talk about each of those. We'll also, look at different tools and utilities and techniques for, going and completing the end-to-end process, for building multi-language reports. Okay, now let's kind of start with this idea that Power BI provides internationalization and localization features. We just have to figure out how to use them. So many companies have done the build the English report, save as the Spanish report, and take 2 days to go and make all the changes. And that just gets to be, something that's, very tedious and obviously, not a good way to lower overhead. So what we want to do is we want to create one report that supports multiple languages. Then there's only, one report or one data set, when it's time to make changes.
So now, Ted, let me ask you a question before we get too far. In this case, you're really talking about the UI layer, the layer that's presented, not the data itself, not the data sitting back in the database that's being rendered, but like the labels on screen and the elements. Is that what you're talking about? Am I correct on that?
Can I give you the answer? It depends.
Okay. Excellent. Even better.
It's both. We're going to see that as we go through.
Okay.
But I created a set of guidance, back in 2021, published it in July 2021, and there's been a bunch of changes since then. So that was one of the motivations for, revisiting this guidance and freshening it up. So the user culture function, which lets you determine, what's the language and locale of the current user.
Mm-hmm.
That allows us to write measures that dynamically do translations. Now there's more properties of visuals and shapes where you can bind these measures to them. And then for data translations, what you were talking about, Scott, we have this new feature named field parameters. Now, the guidance that we're going to go through is also going to use an external tool that we built, and it's called Translations Builder. We had an original version that we published and made available in July 2021 with the first, version of our guidance. But now with this new guidance, we've also done a lot of updates to Translation Builder. And the idea was just to make it significantly more productive for content creators using Power BI Desktop. Okay,
that's outstanding. And I assume that you have these tools that you're providing are all free and available on the website you're going to provide? Okay.
They're not official Microsoft products. It's kind of really more considered a community effort. But they're tools. I'm going to cover them. There's be plenty of information for people to learn how to install and start using them.
Fantastic. We'll provide links to all this. Cool.
Absolutely. Now, there is a demo that we have that's live. If you went to this link right here, what we wanted to do is put something out there so people who are skeptical could go down and, as you move down the left navigation section, Spanish, French, Dutch, Italian, Portuguese, what's that language? It's all Greek to me, but just showing what's possible to really kind of do the work to build a multi-language report and deal with translations in an end-to-end process. Now, let's start with a couple fundamentals. So Power BI supports what are called metadata translations, and it's something that's supported at the dataset level for dataset objects. So the type of dataset objects that support translations include tables, columns, and measures. Also hierarchy and hierarchy levels. We won't get into those details. We'll just concentrate on the first three. And then also it's properties of these objects, that get translations. So there's one obvious property. You want to set the table name or the measure name. So the caption property, is what we use, to put a translation so that a measure name gets displayed a certain way in Spanish. There are other properties, description and display folder, that are possible, but I think we're just going to focus on caption because, that's the main thing that we need, if our goal is to, supply translations for the report consumers, not so much, report editors. Now, metadata translations currently requires Power BI Premium. So what you're going to see here is, if I switch over here, we're going to need a target workspace that has a diamond. And the issue is that they don't load correctly in a workspace that's not associated with a premium capacity. That's not something we plan to have forever. We do have plans to address this and make this work, inside the shared capacity. I just don't have any timing or details on that currently. And then finally, remember, metadata translations are only applicable to database objects. Nothing in the report layout supports, any explicit feature, for localization. Now, let's look at how reports load in the Power BI service. So the default behavior whenever a report loads is that the Power BI service sets up a context for that user, that includes the user's language and the user's locale. And by default, that information is taken from, the user's browser setting. Now, you can override that by adding a language parameter to the URL. And, that's what we do quite a bit when we do testing, and sometimes we need to use that, for the way that we deploy things. Now, I talked about this new function called USERCULTURE. So USERCULTURE is something that reads the context for the current user, and it returns a string value like en-us or fr-fr. And so the first two lowercase letters, are the language identifier, and the uppercase letters, are the locale identifier. Now, let's say we want to, write a method that dynamically does the translation. So we're going to start by calling USERCULTURE and just taking the left two lowercase characters, that's the language, and then we're going to write this very simple DAX pattern, where we take that language identifier, we have a switch statement. And if you look at the switch statement there, we have callouts for ES Spanish, FR French, and DE German. Note that we don't call out the default language of English. Instead, it's the fallback. So if the user, has a language of English or anything that's not one of those other three, we basically load in the English, so we have a fallback pattern. Okay, Scott, don't worry. I'm not going to ask you to write this kind of code by hand.
Excellent. Because 2 years ago when I was doing this, I did write a lot of this by hand, and and as soon as I made a mistake, everything would fall apart. So I'm really excited to see how you've done this.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to write measures to translate, like a report label, the title of the report, for English or Spanish. But how do we deal with like dates and numbers? And the answer is you don't have to really do much. We're never going to have to write a measure to say what locale is that user in and how do I. And the reason for that, is that you have measures and columns and you assign format strings to them. And then visuals, are able to look at the the user locale, and also look at the format string and do the right thing. So as long as you use format strings, that, don't hard code something like, the pattern that would, indicate one region, things are going to work. Here's an example. Look at short date and the difference between loading with ENUS and ENGB. It basically flips the, the month and date around inside there. Okay, now there are 3 types of translations. And, before you start doing any type of work, make sure these 3 are straight in your head, which ones they are. So there's metadata translations, and that's, measure names, column names. There's report label translations. So think of any text on a report, like a title or a button caption that doesn't have an associated dataset object. That is a report label translation. And then there's also data translations. Now let's look at a couple examples of each one. So with metadata translations, you're going to add translations for things like the names of columns and measures. And then as the report loads, what's nice is once you get the metadata translations in place, they automatically load in the Power BI service. So there they are showing up in the column headers for a table. If I have card visuals with measure names, they're going to show up inside there. Now we can say that metadata translations, especially with the tools that we're going to look at here, are going to be the easiest ones to create and manage. Report label translations, are also going to be important. And remember that these are text elements, on a report. They're not associated with a dataset object, so we can't use the metadata translations. And the report layout designer has, absolutely no localization features. So because Power BI provides no direct feature support, we're going to have to innovate. So a little bit later, we'll kind of look at, how we're going to do this, but as I said, the user culture function, and its ability to write a dynamic measure, is going to be central to, how we implement that. Okay, and then finally, there are data translations. So obvious examples would be product names, category names, country names. And, these are harder to implement, because it lives in the underlying data. If you want to have a slicer and slicer values, you're going to have to go through, the process of figuring out how to implement data translations. Okay, now let's end this first section. I want to point you to a couple resources right here. So here are all those URLs you talked about, Scott. Look at this pattern: HTTPS, aka MS, multi-language report videos, multi-language report guidance, multi-language report labs. Okay, so the videos is just a video playlist, much like what we have here, but 3 hours of content instead of 1 hour. Also, for those of you that like kind of deep technical documents, we have, this guidance document right here that's going to go through the same material. And then finally, if you're like me, you don't really get it until you've got it under your fingertips and you've done something and seen it working, in front of you. So we have this lab that's going to step through, what we think are the important aspects to be able to, build a multi-language report from end to end. Okay, let's keep going.
To be clear, let me ask you: these are assets, and other than the videos, like that document you did and the labs, these are all brand new, right?
These are published as of July. I'm sorry,
Okay.
January this year.
January this year.
For instance, go down here. Look at this right here. Published January 2023. Fantastic. I wanted people to know that. What you're saying.
Excellent.
Yeah, this is not the same old guidance that we had before.
Yeah. So if you tried it in the past and you had the came away with an ulcer like I did, this is a brand new solution and it's pretty much, I would say that you've driven the whole thing by yourself, isn't it? I know you've worked with some folks, but this is your baby.
Yeah, my mom's helped a lot too, but I digress. Okay, now let's say we want to work with metadata translations. So the first thing to see is that Power BI Desktop does not expose metadata translations, no way to view, add, or edit them. So you need some help. Now we're still going to use Power BI Desktop, but we need an external tool. So when I first started working with this, I used Tabular Editor. You can open it up. And I remember one of my first projects at Microsoft, I worked with the Tabular Editor and just did everything manually, copying and pasting. And I was going, 8 hours a day, and that led me to the observation there has to be a better way. So the developer in me wanted to automate this. So Tabular Editor also allows you to write scripts, which you can use to automate the tasks associated with adding and managing metadata translations, or just move Tabular Editor to the side and write a custom application with C# and use the tabular object model. Then you could program right against it yourself.
Yeah,
unless you're not a developer.
You say that like it's a
yes,
like mortals like me.
The sentence. Unless you are a developer or you have better things to do with your time was what I was going to add in. Okay. Or use Translation Builder. So here's a tool that someone took the time, to write a custom application with C# and the tabular object model to kind of do this work. Now, Translation Builder, has 2 different versions. So make sure that the one you're using is version 2. I put it right up on the title bar there so you know which version that you're using. And note that this tool is going to help us first with metadata translations. It's also going to help us with report label translations as well. Now, what is the core value proposition of this tool? It lets you work in this friendly grid. Hey, I'm working in Excel workbook, but as you, make your edits, it's doing the kind of the dirty work behind the scenes, to read and write metadata, from that Power BI data set. Now, the way that you use it is that you install it, as you go through the lab, it's going to walk you through the installation, but then you're able to fire it up just like any of your other favorite external tools. Note the Translation Builder and the ALM Toolkit have an especially good relationship because Translation Builder only works on things in Power BI Desktop, but then you can use, the ALM Toolkit to, push your changes, from that local data set you're working on locally, out into production. Pretty neat stuff. Okay, now the way things work is that when you fire up Translation Builder, it's just a .NET 6 application that runs, and it is then going to kind of create a connection right back to that Power BI desktop data set that's loaded in memory, and running in the local, analysis services engine. Now, things that we can do is when you use Translation Builder, we'll show you things like the connection property, what's the name of the PBX file, and what's the default language, for this project. There's also a compatibility level, which, at this point in time, should be 1550. Now, when we load the data model, into this tool, it's only going to load things that are visible in report view. There's really no reason to load in things that are hidden because those aren't things that we show to the user. They don't need to be translated. So let's say that we, go back here. So if you do the lab, this is going to be your starting point. So we see we have, these things inside here, and I should be seeing that. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. But what I'm trying to get at here is that you're now going to kind of come up here and you're going to start this up, and things that are visible in report view will show here. Things that are not won't show. Okay, now beyond that, what we need to do is kind of understand how metadata translations are identified. So there will always be these 4 columns, and the first 3 columns identify the translation, what type of object, what's the property, and give us a name so we can identify that object. And then the 4th column, is going to be the translations for the default language, which is just going to be the exact same, as the object name itself. Now, remember that, these first 3 columns are read only. The 4th column you can edit, but, I would be hesitant and not jump in and start, doing all the edits to those, just because if you edit the, the translation for the local language, it doesn't show up in Power BI Desktop. It makes things confusing. So generally we're going to edit with multiple languages. Now, I want to add a language. So the idea is we give you the Add Language button, And when you click that, we bring up the add language dialog. So let's say I pick Spanish. And the idea is when you pick Spanish, it adds a new column so we can track, the translations for that language. Okay, I want to add a couple more languages. Note that the add language dialog supports multiple selection, so I can support multiple ones at the same time. And while we're on adding languages, let's say you added one by mistake. So it's also possible to right click on the column header. And when you do that, there's a delete secondary language command. When you execute that, it's going to prompt you, because when you delete that column, you're deleting the language, you're deleting all the translations that you put inside there. Okay. Now, the idea of the translation grid is in version 2, I really kind of wanted to make this something that, if I was doing this work all day, I would want something that cuts down the manual tasks. So the ability just to kind of select a cell, type in it, and hit enter to move down, is a pretty important part. Now, let's go back here. And, what I'll do is let's kind of start by adding a language. So let's say that I add Spanish. Okay, and now I say, this, hit enter is easy. Now, this isn't always the scenario, but if you use Power BI Desktop and English, Spanish, French, and German, and you can just change the keyboard and type things in, you're good to go. Okay. Now, that's not the only scenario. There will be a lot of scenarios where we have a lot more, division of labor, where we have human translators. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to quickly kind of import some Spanish translations here. And I just realized I did something very silly there. So what I'm going to do here, okay, Scott, don't look at what I'm doing. I ruined my demo. Okay, and then we'll choose cancel. I just wanted to get those Spanish translations in there for the next part of the demo. And we're not supposed to have this yet in the demo, so I will delete that as well. Okay, back to the demo in progress. But let's say that now I've got these Spanish translations. Now, one thing to realize is that external tools can't click save. They can change, what's in memory, but you're always going to have to come back here, save in Power BI Desktop, and now we're going to click on Publish. Now, I'm going to go ahead and click on Publish. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to kind of push this report, up to the Power BI service. And, once we've got this report, up there in the Power BI service, give it one more second, success. Okay, so let's go back here. And if we look at product sales demo, that's the right time. Let's go ahead and open this thing up. Now, I could change my browser settings, to Spanish. And if I did 10 languages, I could keep changing my browser settings, but during testing, it's going to be a lot easier just to go into the report URL, type in the question mark, and then we're going to type language equals ES-ES, because that's what Spanish is. And, if you don't have this correct, if you forget the question mark or language is incorrect, when you hit enter, it's just going to, delete it from, but, once you push this in and it's accepted, first thing that you're going to see is that the whole Spanish UI switches from English to German, but also here, look at these, column headers, look at this visual title, look at this right here, so we see that, we've got our first of 3 translation types, which is metadata translations. Okay, so now you've seen that, we can make this observation. And the observation is that, as you're building multi-language reports, there's this set of steps we repeat again and again. And that is add translations to this dataset PBX project from Translation Builder, save the PBX file project in Power BI Desktop, publish to the Power BI service, and then test translations using the language parameter. And then, just like the instructions on the shampoo bottle, repeat steps 1 through 3 as many times as possible as you need.
That's great. So it's as if I make the change I update it using the language editor, then I go to Power BI Desktop, hit save on that version of the file, and then I publish it. And that one version of the file has all those different translations built into it. And all I have to do is add that question mark, language equals, and then whatever the language and culture code is.
Exactly. And once you do
then
that, you're all the way home, or at least a third of the way there.
that's awesome, man.
Okay, so now we kind of seen that. Let's go ahead and, one thing I'll point out is that, as you're starting to do this testing, you might find that, you have these bookmarks here in the browser. So let me take this first one and I'll just kind of switch this one to, English. And now that I've done that, let's go back up here and do kind of the same thing that we did before. So language equals ES-ES. And now that I've done that, let's go ahead and kind of capture a bookmark so we don't have to keep going up to that, gosh darn address bar and typing in that stuff. So now if I, want to look down here at my card visuals, I can kind of quickly, switch between languages because we have these bookmarks, just to automate that part of the process. Okay, good stuff. Now, let's get on to generating machine translations. So Translation Builder supports generating machine translations, because it has a way to integrate with the Azure Translator service. Now, Translation Builder provides commands which can automatically populate metadata translations. So the idea is, I don't want to type these in, just click a button and, use AI. And machine translations are often not the final result and the quality that you need, but they're a great first step because now I can start testing my reports. And, the human translators now just have to kind of look at the machine translations and approve them or revise them, which is a lot easier than building, everything from scratch. Now,
wow, that's a huge savings in terms of like time, especially if you're sending it off for a translation service. A huge cost saving just to get it started that way. That's cool.
I would say so. Now, I'm not going to spend much time here, but one of the things that you're going to need is you're going to need a key to the Azure Translator service, and you're going to need an Azure subscription or a friend with an Azure subscription to do this. So if you go into the Azure portal, go to the marketplace and search translator, you'll find translator. You want to get this translator. You're going to give it a region. You're going to give it a name. There's also a pricing tier. And notice that for each subscription, there is one free translator service instance that you can create that will give you up to 2 million characters a month. But the idea is that once you've created this, you can then go to keys and endpoints. You can then say show keys. And now that I've showed you my key, I will be sure that I retired this key directly after this session today. But the idea is that you're going to take that particular key, and now we go back to Translations Builder, and it has a option to configure different things. And so once you put that key in there, it's going to light things up inside here. Okay, so now that we have this, let's go ahead and generate translations. Okay, a demo is worth 1,000 bullet point slides. So let's say that we go back to this demo here. Okay, so let's go back to add translations. And this is what we do in the lab. You're going to follow this flow. You're going to add French, you're going to add German, and there's different ways that you can add these. I could double click on a row, that will just give them for the row. If I just wanted to do one column, I can come back up here and I could choose, French right there. And, actually, sorry, one column over. Let's go over here to French, generate translations. So there's different things inside here, including the ones down below. Generate all translations just says replace everything with fresh machine translations. Or this one, let's say that we have some junk here. If I say fill all empty translations, it's going to fill everything except it didn't hit this one. So now if we come back up here, to French and we say, switch that to German, run German translations. Okay, so what you can see here is that just gives you a real quick way, to at least get your first pass at these translations. Now, let's go ahead and follow that same pattern. So back here, let's go ahead and save our work. Let's go ahead and hit publish. And now that we have done that, and we replace the data set that's there, let's go ahead and see what we got over on the other side. Okay, great. So we come back here and we test out Spanish, and down here we see, okay, we got Spanish. Let's try a couple other things. So we'll say FR, and our boss Mark Regera would love this. Now we got these things in French. Let's go ahead and capture that in a bookmark as well. And then let's not forget Deutschland. So we'll go ahead, add Germany, and now we've got those down here as well. And we might decide, never translate this site, go away. And then back up here, now we're going to kind of, create one of these for, okay, I've done something wrong here. One more time. Nope. There we go. Now we have German inside there. So now, even though we haven't kind of moved on to, translation types 2 and 3 yet, you can kind of start seeing that, it was hard to support one secondary language, but not very hard to move from 2 languages to 3 or 4 or 10 or 40. So that should really be, something that, factors into your strategy of how you, create these reports.
What's awesome about this, or what I didn't have when I was doing this back in the day, is that's just one report it's the same report. I had to go to fall back to this thing of creating one version of a report for each language. And that was terrible. This is so much better. I love this.
Okay, now let's move on to the next topic, creating and testing report label translations. Now there's this issue, and the issue is report labels don't have an associated database object. So Power BI doesn't really have a natural way to support storing translations and giving localization features. So what do? We innovate. Now the things that we care about are things like the title of a report, button captions. Now some visuals, if you just use the default title that's created dynamically, work out. But sometimes Ted the poor sucker hard codes a visual name in and ruins the localization effect. So we're going to look at that. But what we'll see is we're going to keep falling back on the user culture function, and writing DAX statements, that dynamically hand back the right text value given the user's language. Okay, now before we get into report title translations, what are things that you don't want to do because they can't be localized? So adding a text box or a button and hard coding text values in the report designer, that can't be localized. Page tabs also don't support localization. So generally we want to hide page tabs from the user, and then also hard coding text values for a title property. Now by default, if you don't touch the title property, it will, let's say I drop sales revenue in one data role and product and year in other data roles. What's really neat for that is that when you flip to a different language and you have metadata translations, it automatically changes that dynamic title. And once again, once you hard code in a value and kind of replace that dynamic behavior, that's problematic. So what Translation Builder is going to do, it's going to add this table. And let's do a demo real quick, then we'll kind of come back and talk about what's really happening. So let's say that inside of my project, I now go back here to Translations Builder, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop down here, and there's something called Create Localize Label Table. So this is where we're going to add our report labels. Now, when you add the localized label table, it brings up this dialog saying, hey, this thing's kind of complicated. Would you like to get redirected, to this page where we're going to, give you, more understanding of what this is? Okay, so that page will explain the same thing I'm explaining right now. But the idea is that when you create the localized label table, it creates a table behind the scenes in Power BI Desktop. Note that it is hidden. And hope I'm not making you seasick, Scott, jumping around. But now let's do this. Let's say that I want to add a report label. So I want to add one for the title. So I can say add report label. I can add that inside here. And when I do that, you can just see behind the scenes, it's added this inside here. Okay, now let's say that, I have a whole batch of these. And once again, as I was kind of working with this tool, I was thinking, what if I have to put in 150 labels? I don't want to put them in one by one. So if I choose add label, we've added this advanced mode. So first of all, let's delete all that junk that was in there. So we'll go ahead and click that. Now let's go ahead and add this set of labels inside there and click OK. And now that we've done that, look what we have down here. So the first thing that we see is that the localized label table allows us to add measures, which are data set objects. Therefore, Power BI can automatically track these, inside of the data set. Okay, so there's a bunch more. We're going to build a couple concepts here to see, the big picture. But the first thing to see is that report labels are tracked as metadata translations, for their associated measure. Now, the localized labels table is the one exception where hidden database objects are going to be displayed in the grid. And that's because of the strategy that we're using. Now, when you work with a localized label table, you do all your work through Translations Builder. You don't ever need to interact, with a localized label table in Power BI Desktop. I'm just showing you this so you kind of understand, what's going on behind the scenes, but don't do this at home. Now, you've seen how to create it. You've seen that little prompt inside there. And now that you've seen that, I also kind of walk through, adding in. But now, what's really neat about this is that report label translations get stored in the exact same format and in the exact same PBX file as all your metadata translations. And secondly, the experience for creating and editing report label translations now is the exact same experience, as metadata translations. And the idea is, hey, let's go ahead and use, the machine translation technique, just to populate these inside there. So once again, we come back up here, we kind of see these inside. Let's say, fill all empty translations. And, now you can kind of see that we're going through and we've got all those filled in. Okay, now, once you've done this, as I mentioned, there's a second piece. And what I showed you was kind of how we use the localized label table in our first version, but it didn't go far enough. So the localized label table doesn't provide an easy way to surface report labels. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to basically run a command that's going to run a piece of code, and it's going to create a bunch of measures by looking at what's in localized labels. So there is this command called generatetranslatedlabeltable. And, if I come down here, let's, one more time. If we go here and, now I say generate the localized labels table, it's going to create this table down here, just so you can kind of see things inside here. Let's go ahead and, we'll add a new localized label named Bob. Okay, and now it's over here, but it's not over here yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to, generate this one more time. And now you see them in both places. And just for completeness, if you have a localized label and you want to get rid of it, you can click on the third column, which gives you a delete option. And, one more time now, we'll go ahead and run this. But you can see we keep these two things in sync. Now, while localized label is hidden and never intended to be seen by report authors, this one's quite the opposite. If we go back to report view, what you can see is that now we have the localized label table And if we kind of look at the DAX inside here, what we can see here, is that it was able just to generate these things. Now, one thing I caution you is this is machine generated. So let's say that, I make a big change to the DAX inside, and then, later we come back here and we generate the localized label table again. You can see that it continues to overwrite this. So just assume that, you're never going to edit, what's inside there. But now what we have is this set of measures that are very easy to use, inside of your report. So, for instance, let's say I drop a card visual and I just can add, one of those labels, to the role inside there. Also up here, what I find to work really well, and this, wasn't possible, when I created the first round of guidance, is you use a shape, you pick one of those shapes, and then we're kind of able to go through the process of, changing the fill and border and, the text size and text color. But now we're able to get inside there and see that text, right there. We've hard coded the text value in, but here's what's new, that FX button. So the idea is I click the FX button and now I can pick, one of those measures that has the dynamic translation inside. Okay, now let's go back here and, just to go through, we'll just do a little bit here. I'm kind of running short on time, but I want to at least kind of see, how this will come out. So if I go ahead and we click on this, and then we go down to shape, and then we go down to style. And in style, let's close things till I finally get to text. So let's go down here. I want the measure for the report title. Let's add that. And now I'll kind of do the same process, for each one of these buttons right here. So this is, sales summary. And, now that we have pick sales summary, we'll get sales category. And, this could get quite tedious, if you have to go over, 200 different shapes and visuals to get them all online. But, once you've got it in place, now it gets bound and, you're able to add more languages, more translations, without coming back here and doing those things. Okay, so I just changed page one, but that should kind of demonstrate for our purposes. So now let's go ahead and hit publish. And, one more time, we'll go ahead and we'll push this out. And now that we have pushed this out right here, we should now be able to go back here and, let's look at Spanish. And as I refresh here, and, now there's my report title in Spanish and my button captions in Spanish. And, we test French and that is looking good. And now we test German. Okay, so Scott, now we kind of ahead because we've gotten, the metadata translations and the report label translations, both implemented. And now we're kind of in the home stretch. There's just one more type of translation, that we have to work through, and that is data translations. Now, inside of this slide deck here, I'm going to move ahead a little bit just because of time. And what I now want to talk about is how we integrate with other humans that are acting, as translators. You might have one scenario where you have a very talented person who knows Power BI desktop modeling, and they speak lots of different languages and can do all this work themselves. And then other cases, you'll have a separation between dataset authors and report authors, and you'll have another team of translators. So what Translations Builder uses is this idea of a translation sheet. So the idea of a translation sheet is we want some file that we can send out, have human translators work on, and send it back. Now, in this version, we support CSV files. We're considering other formats, maybe regex, in future versions. But the idea is that you're able to generate these CSV files. You're then able to send them out to a human translator. The human translator is then able to kind of go through and either, revising machine translations or adding translations from scratch. They're going to send you those files back, and then we need to integrate them. So the idea of a translation sheet is what we export and import. And then we also have this concept of the outbox folder and the inbox folder. Now, here are the different options we have for export import. So there's going to be 3 commands, for exporting translations, and all the export options you can either enable or disable open in Excel. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. And there's only one import command because it can import, any type of translation sheet. Now you can configure the inbox and the outbox. So if you go through and you do our lab, we're going to have you, do that work. And then let's say we want to, export translation sheets. Now for this demo, let's say that I come back here and let's look at my outbox. Outbox is first. That's the thing where we're generating files that we're going to send out. Okay, so if I come back here and let's say that at first we'll take Spanish, and don't worry about letting me see it. I just want to generate this file. Let's go ahead and click Export Translation Sheet. And you can just see it creates that, and it uses this naming convention of PBX file name -translations -language name. Okay, well, now let's go ahead and open French, and this time let's pick open in Excel. And so now it's going to bring it open. So now if I wanted to kind of see it, I could open it up. And note that for translators, it's just this last column that we want them to work through. One little caveat is because we're using CSV files, you cannot have commas, in your translations. If we add some other formats, we can remove that limitation. Now, let's say that you don't have 3 languages, but you have 40 languages, and now you've just finished things. So we always have this export all translation sheets. And what I should have done there is to get rid of the open in Excel option. Okay, sorry about that, Scott. I screwed up the demo. Let's try that one more time. We'll come back here. We'll delete these, and this time I'll disable that. Now we'll click on export, and you can just see it kind of creates all the files at once. Now, finally, there is another option to export what we're going to call a master translation sheet. Let me go ahead and kind of pick this one, export all translations. And as I do that, what you can see is that now this kind of gives you a backup of all your work. It gives you kind of all the translations here. And whether you want to work on this or just kind of keep it as a backup, you're able to do that. Now, as you go through the lab, what we want is kind of for you to kind of see how things work. So let's do this. Let's take French. Let's take master. Let's go ahead and move them, over to the inbox. At the same time, I'm going to open up French. And, under French, what are we going to call? We'll just have like Dijon mustard. Okay, I'm just doing something so we can kind of see the effect of this inside here. And let's go ahead and save. Scott, I'm not sure if that's the correct way to spell Dijon mustard, but I'm sure I'll get in trouble from Mark if it's not. Now I'm going to close Excel. Make sure you always close the file in Excel before you try to import it. But now we come back here, and assume that this is a file I've just gotten back from my French translator, and we come back. Oh, well, looks like we need a better French translator. Last point. What if I import the master? That will just restore things that were in before. So let's say someone came in here and messed things up, but I have a backup of the master from last night. I can simply add that in. And, after this moves through here, master, you can see that it adds the correct translations back in.
That's great.
But wait, there's more, Scott.
There's more.
What if, somehow Mark did something, he made me work on a weekend, and so I'm just going to get rid of French despite him. And then he said, just kidding, you don't have to work on the weekend, but I've thrown away the French language. Well, what am I going to do now? So what's kind of nice about the import logic here is that as you import, if it sees that there is a language in the master sheet that's not here, it automatically adds it in on the fly. So just kind of getting to a couple different points right here. And I think I've talked about that once again, trying to make up a little time right here. But this idea of being able to, take a master translation sheet and have it be a backup. It can also be, something where I use it for a starting point. So for instance, I have this project and I've already added a bunch of things to it. Okay, so let's do this. Let's go in Power BI Desktop. Let's create a new project. And inside of this new project, what I'm going to do is let's quickly kind of create a couple items in the data model. So what I'll do, we'll create the products table. And with the products table, we'll say I want to choose my columns. And, the columns that we will choose, will be these two right here. And, let's say this one is product. So I'm trying to kind of match up these names, compared to what I have in the other project. Okay, so now, that we've added these in. Here's my brand new project. In my brand new project, we're going to open up Translations Builder. Pretty minimal starting point, but now we'll say import and we'll take that master sheet. And what is it going to do? It's going to ignore, any dataset objects in there that aren't in my target project. We didn't do that in 1.0, so that's a step forward. But also, if you have localized labels, it will add the localized label table if necessary. So now all I got to do, is generate the localized label table. And, now in my brand new project, I have, all the localized labels, that I've used on the 3 other products that I deal with. So the key point that we have here, is that we can move data between projects. So the logic that's built into import is include metadata translations for any dataset object, in the translation sheet that exists in the target dataset. Ignore metadata translations for any objects in the import sheet that aren't in the target dataset. Add secondary languages and their translations if language does not exist in target dataset. And then finally, add localized label table and report labels if they do not exist. So once again, the idea is that we were supposed to, create some type of a master translation sheet, that has these localization resources, that we just kind of want to, adding into every new project. Okay, we're almost at time, Scott, but I think we need to go a little bit over because this last section is so good. So
I'm here for it, man.
You ready? Okay.
Bring it.
So the last thing that we're going to do, is to implement data translations. Now, the software industry has been implementing data translations, since the internet became a thing. What was that, back in 1999? And there are these 2 patterns for, supporting data translations at the database level. One's add an extra column for each language. One's add an extra row. Now, in the past, it's been challenging to use the add an extra column technique, even though that one is far more efficient. So the problem is Power BI doesn't support dynamic evaluation for calculated columns. Calculated columns are evaluated at dataset load time. So when a dataset loads, if you have calculated column logic to say, pick the language for this user, that decision has already been made when the dataset loads in. And so 3 different users that all speak different languages that load reports, don't get anything there. So when I did this guidance, back in 2001, I said row replication, is the best way to implement data translations. Now I'm going to say row replication was the best way, but now we have better options that we'll talk about. Now, there's this row replication strategy that I used in the first version. And the idea is you add multiple rows, then you can filter on the row, but once I published this, I started thinking, gosh, it's just not that scalable. It's not that efficient. I started getting some feedback from customers the same. And then when it got real ugly is when my mom got involved. So a little background. My mom is very woke in the sense that she's very intolerant, of inefficient use of resources, especially in the digital domain. So my mom, her thing is all about storage and compute. So while other kids, were told, asked by their mom, have you cleaned your room? My mom was always, did you defrag your hard drive? Did you close the tabs, in the browser window you weren't using? Did you spin down your VM for the weekend? So that's what she's like. And I made the mistake of telling her to review this. She looked at it and she says, don't use roll application. It's horrible. It's inefficient. She threatened to go public. And,
I'm having a hard
cancel
time
me.
believing this, man.
Yeah, well,
It sounds
you
like
haven't met my mom yet. She's quite the pill.
This sounds like a label table fable.
Well, I'm not going to respond to that. I'm going to pretend you didn't say that. Anyway, so I had to give in to my mom and said, well, what should we do? And she says, use a, extra column. And I said, how are we going to do that, in Power BI? And she said, use field parameters. And I said, what are field parameters and why would I use them? And what she said is field parameters rule. Okay, so let's look at how we're going to approach this. First of all, we're going to take our underlying data source and, translations builder is not going to help us at all with this. This is something where we're changing the underlying data source and we're doing data modeling. But let's say that we have the products table and we have 4 columns and we have the categories table and it has 4 columns. And if we need to add extra languages going forward, it's just adding extra columns and somehow, keeping those, up to date with the correct translations. Next, we're going to use a field parameter, which begs the question, what is a field parameter? You're going to add a field parameter. It's going to look like a table. And each row in that table represents a field. So first of all, think of a fields parameter as just a collection of fields. Now, the rows of a field parameter can be filtered. So now you can think of a field parameter, as a filterable collection of fields. Now, when I started researching field parameters, I found some great, blogs from Power BI MVPs that kind of showed me how to use them, and they all used measures, not columns. And there's neat things that you can do. Let's create a field parameter with 6 measures, and then we'll let the user at runtime pick which of those measures appear in a table. Okay, but when we use field parameters for the use case of data translations, we're going to only add columns, not measures in. Now, what's nice is that the field parameter can be configured to act as a column selector. So the idea is that the field parameter will show up as a table in the fields list for report designers, and we will give them a single field product that they will drop on a report service. But behind the scenes, we have this really cool control to swap out, what is the language behind there. Okay, and what we want to be able to do, is to kind of set the language at report load time after I figure out, whether the user speaks English or Spanish or French. Now, if you go through the lab, it's going to take you through these steps of creating the field parameter. Now, when you create a field parameter, you give it a name. So we have this naming convention. If it's for products, the field parameter itself, we're going to call translated product name. We add those columns, and if I come back here, what you'll see is that when you create the field parameter and you select it in the fields list, there is a DAX expression behind it, that defines those fields. And if you need to, you can modify it. Now, when you create a field parameter, in report view, you only see that one field. And by default, it has the same name, as the top level table, which is the field parameter. Now, if you do the lab, we have you do this experiment, and that is you're going to create a new page, you're going to create the field parameter, and you're going to ask for the option to create a slicer along with it. Now you add a table visual, and you add that field translated product names, into the columns data role. And at first, you haven't selected anything. You're going to see all 4 columns. But the idea is once you select a column, you're only going to see, one of those source columns. And, once again, there's different ways to use field parameters, but when we're using them for data translations, we pretty much want to always select one column at a time. Now, there's some other implementation details. That DAX expression, doesn't have the translated column names. So one of the things that we do is, in the lab, we have you go through and copy and paste in some DAX, to put the right thing inside there. Also note that if you look at the field parameter in data view, you're going to see that there's 2 extra hidden columns. Now, what we should do, is rename these. So the columns inside of field parameter, can be renamed. And so let's take the one that we're going to use in the report, just name it product. We're going to rename the other ones fields in sort order. Okay, now here's the cool part. We need something to filter when I have multiple parameters, multiple field parameters. So there's this trick, and note that look at the difference between these. Each row has 3 parameters, and now we're just tacking on a 4th parameter. So we're just updating the DAX statement. And when you do that, it adds a new column. So now we can add a column for filtering. It's initially called value 4. That name isn't exactly what we wanted, so we're going to change it to language ID. One other thing is that we want to call out to Gerhard Rickel. He had the blog post where we learned about this, so just wanted to give credit where credit is due. Thank you very much for that. Now, a couple cleanup things. You got this field parameter, which is kind of like a table of fields that you want to pick. So we'll do things like change the sort order. We'll make sure language ID is hidden. Once again, these are details if you want to go through the lab. Now, the last piece right here is we need some kind of central mechanism to filter to switch languages. So we're going to add the languages table. Once we've added the languages table, then what we could do is create a language ID relationship between these two. And now by adding a filter, on the languages table, in fact, it's added a filter, to the translated product names. And now we've done it for one field parameter. So now let's go through the steps of creating, a second field parameter. First one for product names, this one for category names. And now, we're able to kind of do the exact same thing. And so once again, here, if you do the lab, we're going to have you, do data translations on 2 columns, but in real projects, you might have 10 or 20 or 50 columns, so this is something that supports, scaling up. Now, once you've kind of gotten to this point right here, we're able to then start, modifying our reports, to kind of use the fields inside of our field parameters, instead of using something, that only has one language and doesn't give you the option to switch between languages. Now, if, we go and we do all this work right here, let's go back up here. And where do I want to go? I want to go here. And now we'll go back to English and just a couple more slides. And then we'll finish up by kind of seeing, how the demo should look at the very end. But we're going to update the reports. And one last piece is when you load the report, how do you set the language correctly? So in the lab and what I'm going to show here, we're going to use report bookmarks. There will be other approaches. You could use RLS and use an RLS rule to filter and select the correct language for the user. If you're using Power BI embedding, you just have a lot of control to kind of set the filtering the way that you want. But for the hands-on lab, we're going to have you, basically, set the language to Spanish, create a bookmark. Set the language to French, create a bookmark. And then also with these bookmarks, there's different behaviors. We only want the data behavior enabled, not the display or the current page name. Okay, almost done. How do we load the report and apply a bookmark? There is a parameter we can put on the report URL that has a very bad name, bookmark GUID. But the idea is that you can discover these values, for the bookmark GUID. And as I go through and let's say we come back here and with this report, if I come down here and I say, show bookmarks, and then I click on this bookmark, once again, you can kind of see up here, you're able to, get the bookmark with values inside there. So then, the idea is we need to have language tag and the bookmark GUID tag. I've added them, to these up here. And so, now when I go and I look at this, and it here's the end of the lab, you should have the data translations here. If I, go to this next page, we have data translations here. If I, drill down, once again, we got data translations. And then the kicker, if you get through the very last lab, we even show you how to do data translations for the names of months and years. So once again, we'll also test this for French and, what do French people call the days of the week, and German. And now we've gone end to end, and we have, done all our testing. Okay. So I went over by 8 minutes, Scott.
Yep.
But we started 2 minutes late, so maybe I only went over by 6 minutes. What is what's your reaction?
I'm kind of blown away by it. Honestly, I'd seen the comments you'd put out there before and the documents. I thought, okay, well, this would be fine. But I'm kind of blown away by how complete a solution this is and how in depth you've gone with it. Because I struggle. I spent probably 50% of the time I spent on those COVID reports was dealing with the translation stuff. It wasn't actually adding, it was trying to get them all translated in the other languages. What you've done what took me weeks to work with the translator services and getting the values back in and dealing with it, it would have been, minutes in terms of my effort, which is amazing. So man, hats off to you. This is awesome. And I just want to hear you say label table again.
Label table, localized label table.
All right, I like that. So,
okay.
But thanks for sharing this, and I'm excited about it. And you've got links. You want to show the links to where to get all the data again? Yeah, where all these amazing resources are available.
Yes. Well, I could do something, such as this. Let's see if I bring up our old friend Notepad, and then we'll add those inside here.
There you go.
So once
makes it
again,
easy for everybody.
They have the multi-language report guidance. Some of the other.
And is that where you get the language, the utility as well? Or is that in the labs?
Well, all of these will point to the utility.
Okay.
But let's say if I go to here and we go to GitHub and we have translations builder.
There you go.
So this is a repository, but both the guidance doc and the labs live inside here.
Okay.
So if you look at the, labs, we just wanted to create it in Word format, PDF format, and online format. And if you look at the, the guidance document, it's the same thing,
That's fantastic.
If you want to look at it online, great. If you'd rather look at it in PDF or doc and read it on an airplane, that's great too. So there are the resources for everybody. We hope everyone enjoys this. Once again, those other resources, especially the videos, have 3 hours compared to our 1 hour and 10 minutes right here. But other than that, I hope everyone enjoys the tool and we have a much higher level of success than we've had in the past.
Yeah, this is great. This is great. Hey, I've enjoyed it. And you've got another dev camp coming up in about a month. Is that right?
Yes. So good point. We should tell people what we're doing. So this month was the user perspective of Translations Builder. Mm-hmm. But next month, we're going to flip over and see the developer perspective of creating external tools. And we'll look at, how developers could, instead of just using the tool, could take it as a developer and extend it. Or, there's possibilities, to write external tools for Power BI Desktop and do lots of other things, creating calendar tables, formatting your DAX. So we'll just have a discussion, very developer focused on, how to create external tools, that interact with a data set in Power BI Desktop.
That's awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to
that. We should bid our campers goodbye. Sorry, we took a little bit longer than usual.
Have adieu and what other ways can we bid them goodbye? Other than you have to do it in multiple languages for this one, right?
Okay, so how are we going to do that? Let's say we come up here, Scott, and then we'll say add, and we'll say good bye.
Yeah.
And now we've done that. And now we'll click on this right here. Okay.
Au revoir. Auf Wiedersehen. Adios. Excellent. That's fantastic, man.
Good stuff.
Bonus.
Okay, everybody.
Well, Ted, thanks
for
very
attending.
much.
And we'll see everybody else back next month at Power BI Dev Camp.
Sounds great. Cheers, man.